So, Velma Season 2 came out, and my entire community got together to tell me that my mental health is too important to subject myself to it. But I did want to try something. I wanted to try my hand at writing Velma. Okay, writing is a strong word. Plotting is more accurate. This is yet another creative exercise where I ask myself how I would have written something while trying to remain as close to the original as I find acceptable. Also, this isn't exactly a cure-all to the actual show because the show's biggest problem, besides its other biggest problems, was just being funny. And I'm not going to write out like all the jokes for these scenes I'm about to describe to you, just a few starting points. I'm not saying I think this would have been better than the show we got, because I'm sure the right writers can make anything terrible if they put their minds to it, but this is what I would have submitted as a pitch if someone at HBO had shown me the show and then asked me how I'd make it. I want to do this while working within some of the limitations of the original show. So here are the things that will be carried over. 1. It's a comedy aimed at adults. And honestly, this is kinda just gonna translate to actual murders, people wondering if Shaggy's high, and maybe a scene or two of realistically horny teenagers. Most Scooby-Doo properties are already comedies, so it's just that but more adults. Think How I Met Your Mother crossed with an episode of Psych. 2. Velma is the main character, and a know-it-all. That being part of her character arc was almost something I liked in season 1. 3. The series is about tracking down one killer over its entire runtime. 4. Teenagers. 5. Shaggy will be referred to as Norville for the majority of the show. He's gonna get his nickname eventually. 6. Getting as close to the original character arcs and flaws in the show as possible. 7. No Scooby-Doo. Actually, you know what? No, I'm gonna ignore that one. Yes, Scooby-Doo. And while I'm at it, I'm nixing the love square between the characters in the show because I don't want it. I really don't, and you can't make me. Now, let's get started. Firstly, I want to say that it's pretty funny that aside from a pup named Scooby-Doo, this show might have the youngest iteration of the Scooby Gang ever, despite being the one aimed at adults. Honestly, I see no reason to change them from the vaguely high school seniors about to go to college status they seem to have on average. If you've seen the Scooby-Doo episode of Supernatural, which is the only one I've seen, you remember that the episode is about reality intruding on the cartoon. This show is going to do the opposite, with the Scooby Gang intruding on reality. It will be an actual murder mystery in an almost realistic world, with the Scooby Gang and the criminal going through the motions of a Scooby-Doo mystery, confusing the hell out of everyone else. This show will also be full of references to other iterations as building blocks for jokes. And that's going to involve rejecting a bunch of stuff in the actual show we got. Like, Daphne's back to being the rich one of the group, and Fred is low-key the second smartest among them, but hides it really well behind a himbo personality. So, we begin the series with, wait, are they still white? This is mostly an audio outline with clips from a variety of Scooby shows. You won't notice. Actually, if Velma stopped talking about how white Fred is, you might not even have noticed in the original show. My idea for the premise is really an origin. At the beginning, none of the gang are friends. In fact, they're all perceived as stereotypes, especially by Velma. Velma's the nerd, Norville's a lazy, maybe stoner, Daphne is the popular girl, Fred's the quarterback jock. I imagine a scene or two of Velma interacting with them would be a good setup. Let's give her, say, a job to deliver something to all our classmates. Norville dances around the idea he's totally high at the moment, even though he's acting like he is. Especially because he's trying to cook while doing so and seems to be making a mess. Daphne is in the middle of what I guess I will call a makeup trance while helping with the school play and has just started mindlessly putting makeup on the faces of everyone who talks to her, including Velma. Fred's allegedly trying to work on a car in shop class, but he's just making a mess and can't seem to understand that he's gotten some basic stuff wrong. Now, Velma's still gonna make assumptions about her future friends. She thinks Norville's lazy, she thinks Daphne's shallow, she thinks Fred is stupid. But here's what they don't realize. They are all part of an anonymous online group that does mystery solving as a hobby. This can be called Mystery Incorporated or whatever. The group has 5 members. They investigate stuff like historical crime, fictional mystery shows and movies, paranormal events, and even come up with fake murders for the others to solve. That night, group member number 5, SDD, comes up with a really confusing murder mystery for the gang to solve. But they can't come to a conclusion because they all assume different things of the hypothetical suspects. The assumptions are meant to be funny, but make sense to them. For instance, Daphne assumes it was a crime of passion, done by a guy who was pining for a girl, and proceeds to, essentially, write a trashy romance plot that we vaguely understand is her fantasizing about Fred asking her out. Fred actually agrees, but comes up with a convoluted contraption that would have been used for the murder. The real kicker is that Velma asks if it was a ghost and everyone reacts with annoyance, because, in this version, Velma is adamant that ghosts are real. But she also gets very angry when someone tries to fake it, which is all of them. I can't take full credit for this idea though, I got it from Jello Apocalypse. Check out this video when you're done with this. I watched it like 2 years ago and Velma believing in ghosts is like one of the few things I remember from it. I've avoided going back to rewatch it in its entirety because I don't want it to color my making of this video. The meeting ends with them not really solving the mystery, and the next day we get to look at what the gang does with context of the discussion that they just had. Daphne's reading romance novels, but in a vague hope of understanding her suspect's feelings. Norville makes a meal that looks like nonsense but is actually a recreation of the crime scene. Fred is back to destroying the car, but now in a way that's meant to test out his hypothesis. Velma's really the only one who's focusing entirely on school, but that's because she's gonna read up on stuff in her parents' bookstore later. Unlike everyone else, she has better time management skills. Also, I'm thinking she could keep the whole step-parent deal, except her parents are just divorced and not a tragic backstory. I also want to apply something from my video, what Velma teaches us about writing characters. It was inspired by the show I'm rewriting after all. While this Velma is not as abrasive or, well, racist as the one from the show, she would probably still rub people the wrong way. Which is why, as the main character, she needs to hook the audience and get them to want to keep watching. This would involve being funny, but apparently I can't rely on that. Here, Velma's antics are clearly a sort of preemptive defense. If she just presumes people either won't like her or she won't like them, then she doesn't have to try and befriend them and risk failure because she already knows she's gonna fail. So, up front, it's going to present her character arc to the audience so we understand she won't be like this all the time and generate sympathy for her. Also, passion. She's very passionate about solving mysteries to the point where the audience can feel it. Do not underestimate people's ability to enjoy watching someone do something they enjoy. You're watching this on YouTube after all. So, that's the Mystery Gang, a group of weird teenagers that don't realize what they have in common. And then, when school ends, they all get arrested. Turns out someone did do the murder they were theorizing about, and the police found evidence that led to their chat room. And now it's extremely suspicious that 4 of the 5 suspects all know each other despite being supposedly anonymous online and live in the same town as the murder, the victim of which is the CEO of an up-and-coming tech company. The gang, meanwhile, are just absolutely flabbergasted about who their online friends actually are. Depending on how much time you have to dedicate to each scene, this could be the end of the first episode. Daphne's parents get her a lawyer, and when the lawyer gets the police to let her go, she refuses to leave until he gets everyone else released as well. And when the lawyer starts hemming and hawing about the idea of doing so, she decides to stay and then begins to talk about the ideas she has for updating the station style to match modern day. As she rants, the police practically beg the lawyer to get rid of her. This is where I want to introduce an important character, the straight man. They are the detective on the case who may as well be a character from Law & Order, and it's primarily his or her job to be just really confused about how this particular case is just turning into a literal cartoon. Now free, the kids have to grapple with what they know about their online personas and what they assumed of each other. Velma is just shocked to find out that people also assume things about her too, and a lot of them are even incorrect. Specifically, people think that she's a weird, boring kid who doesn't talk to anyone or do any extracurriculars and who may very well just go home and shut down like a robot. After all, Daphne helps the drama club, even if it's largely just to be with her friends. Fred does sports and, well, mutilates cars in shop. Norville's in the cooking club. Daphne just cannot bear to look at anyone. At first, Velma thinks she's acting too good for them, but it turns out she's just embarrassed that her classmates and Fred got a front row seat to her being a hopeless romantic. Fred's reaction is basically to smile and go, "I didn't realize that we're all friends. Let's hang out right now." Norville is really chill, until he isn't and freaks out about the fact that they're all suspects in a murder investigation. Also, to make it clear, he does not do drugs. He's just really good at acting like he does. Until he isn't, because of fear. I think that might also be inspired by something I saw in Jello Apocalypse's video, but like I said, I haven't gone back to rewatch it. From this point on, the show is basically a combination attempt to clear their names and get to know each other. They have two suspect categories: someone who has access to their online group, or someone who has a grudge against the victim, and they investigate from there. If someone falls under both, then it's probably them. After all, someone had to leave the clues for the police to find their chat room. SDD is their main suspect, but they can't contact him anymore. Plus, we get more insight into how the characters individually interact with mysteries. Velma is a facts person. She brings all the known facts about the case together and approaches it with a scientific mind, like an even more emotionally unaware Sherlock Holmes. Daphne is a people person. She looks at the human factor and tries to reason out motives through human nature. Has anyone here read Miss Marple before? Fred goes into the technical process. How was the crime done? What does the murder weapon says about the killer? What processes do they have to go through? Norville's thing is a bit ill-defined. He's really good at not missing small details and very observant. After all, what he usually does is recreate the entire mystery to scale and try to solve it from there. Together, they may just be able to crack the case. Plus, I want to pair them off to get to know each other. Daphne and Norville can look into the victim together to try and piece together the killer from that angle, and they discover that Norville's actually pretty good at coming up with on-the-spot cover stories, an extension of the whole trick the monster while wearing a disguise thing from the original show. I'm imagining it as kind of a Sean and Gus from Psych type adventure. Fred and Velma try to figure out who SDD is and realize they both have a talent for following logic, even though Fred is much more mechanically oriented with a knack for planning and confusing everyone. Also, her sarcasm just rolls off him like water. But then the first big twist happens. A ghost shows up, and Fred literally has to pick the excited Velma up, Scooby and Shaggy style, and run as it gives chase. And this ghost is like really convincing, walk through walls and fly level of convincing. It's not a real ghost, of course, but it almost never is. As for the how, holograms, drones, etc., in the last 50 plus years we've seen quite a lot of explanations for supernatural stuff in this franchise. This is a tech-based ghost that seems to have taken over the town's internet, and he kills again, this time following the style of a different hypothetical murder the gang played. So the gang is investigating a haunting of the internet, as a ghost is recreating fictional mysteries they came up with. I also imagine that in the middle of the season, someone else does a murder and tries to dress it as something the ghost did, and they take an episode off to catch that particular killer. This should get the police to trust them a little and give them more leeway. I mean, in the real world it probably wouldn't, but in this cartoon it does. The next big twist is the discovery of the identity of SDD, or as I imagine many of you have figured out, Scooby-Doo. A human-level intelligent dog that escaped from a government facility and uses the internet to try and make friends. He isn't like super genius smart or anything, but he's a big fan of mysteries. And with that, the gang's all together. Is this a weird explanation for Scooby? Maybe, but I think the canon one is that he's descended from aliens, so... A few more notes on character combinations. Norville's nervous energy and Fred's boisterous one working together. They could also work out that Norville's actually a lot more athletic than he lets on, as we've seen in other iterations of the character. And if we add Daphne to the mix, we can plant the seed for her becoming a martial artist. Velma probably makes some joke about being the intellectual in a group of jocks, and the punchline is her physically lifting everyone and sprinting the next time the ghost chases them. There can be an attempt to sneak into a party involving Daphne giving everyone a makeover as we get into her ideas of beautification. Scooby and Norville becoming friends over a shared love of food. A lot of Daphne's comedic interactions will come from her being a rich girl. A weird rich girl whose reaction to her and her friends getting dirty is to reveal she's bought exact replicas of their outfits so they can change quickly. She is then shocked it takes them more than 5 seconds to do so. Velma and Daphne work together. Here it's Velma's sarcasm versus Daphne's just straight up ignoring you saying something she doesn't want to hear. Also, Daphne being super obvious about her crush on Fred versus Velma being super obvious about her crush on Hot Dog Water. Yes, I'm bringing Marcy back because her nickname is Hot Dog Water and I can't not do that. The entire gang and their collective dislike of how characters in horror movies act. You notice that I haven't given you any suspects, and that's because at this point, the actual killer isn't important. I'm trying to build a character comedy, and the killer's identity will basically come down to what's a funny and satisfying conclusion as determined at a later stage in writing. At this stage, my idea is that they are a hacker who used their technological know-how to frame the group because, as it turns out, one of their families, probably Velma because she's the main character, has ties with the victim and they figured they'd be a great patsy. The characters will also be in need of side plots for when the show doesn't want to use all 5 of them at once. Ideally, the majority of the show's runtime will be spent on the mystery and not, say, Norville trying to sell his organs, but they should still have lives outside it. Velma's trying to reinvent herself as a more outgoing person, especially compared to her new friends, and gets over her off-putting habit of thinking she knows everything about people she's never met. Fred's trying to impress his parents, but while they like the sports stuff, they just don't get the mad scientist stuff he's also into. Norville is just horrified when he realizes that people think he's a stoner and tries a bunch of schemes to kill that perception that fail in a way that make people believe it more. I think it would be hilarious if his arc ended with him accidentally befriending all the actual stoners in school and they nickname him Shaggy. Daphne's got the play she was working on at the beginning and is also futilely trying to get all of her friends to be friends with each other. And all those individual arcs can get some flavor from the fact that the main characters all just got arrested as murder suspects in episode 1 and that complicates things. As for Scooby, he's going to just keep trying to pass for human with decreasingly complicated disguises and inexplicably find that he's succeeding more and more until it gets to the point where he just talks as a dog in front of people and everyone is like, yeah, that may as well happen right now. But I think this is a good place to stop my pitch so far. Honestly, it's been pretty fun to write out a Scooby-Doo story, so I hope you guys have enjoyed it. If you're still watching at this point, I imagine that you did. What do you think? Is it good or have I missed the mark? Do you have any ideas to enhance it? Down in the comments section, I'll have any ideas I get pinned to the top comments, so you tell me yours. Also, leave a like and subscribe for more content or check out my previous Scooby-Doo content. Thank you and good day.